Ipa Tauhau is a type of Maori waiata known as a lament, which explores the feelings of a survivor of the massacre of Raniafia and the sadness that they felt as they were exiled by invading British troops during the invasion of Waikato in 1864. This lament is a piece of literature because it communicates on a deeper level feelings such as fear and longing when you are forced out of your own home. Literature being something that can be so personal is exactly what makes this lament's expression of emotion and feelings hit home, and is very much a collective expression of this group of people. The fact this is a song also makes it oral and full of symbolic meaning and metaphors such as "Your breath touches me, O north wind, bringing sorrowful memories so that I mourn again, and sorrow for my kin, lost to me in the world of spirits." And that was an English translation, which expresses just how lost and far away this massacre has taken this survivor from their own people and their own home. And as written by McRae, the oral compositions were designed to be remembered, to persuade, to provoke, to impress, and to teach, and accordingly were composed in attractive, memorable language. As an example of the Maori oral tradition, Ipa Tohau therefore ensures on multiple fronts that, because of his song, people shall not forget what happened in Raniafia, and that as a piece of literature it will continue to provoke and be memorable. Another form of literature called Talanoa, which is also oral, is more proof that a lament is literature, because a Talanoa can also pierce and transform, stretch and transcend, in addition to retelling and remembering, and sometimes forgetting, memories, which is what a lament does in effect too. As both are oral traditions which can create a conversation, and in the end, despite a Talanoa being more of a place to converse, such as a meeting house, both could be great ways of retelling and remembering the story of Ipa Tohau, which empowers this lament as a work of literature. If Ipa Tohau's song embodies any story, it is a story of deep loss that the survivor feels as a consequence of the massacre. One way this loss is shown throughout the song is its strong connection to water, Wai, which is a central part of Maori mythology. In the song we see these references to water as a sacred Taiana in "O sky, pour down from above, while here below tears rain from my eyes." From this we see their literal grief through their tears, as well as those tears of Rananui, the mythical Sky Father, which reflects the emotional and spiritual connection of the Maori to the land. For the people of Ranafia, who have been torn away from their land, they have both lost their land and these connections which are central to their happiness. In this lament, water as a source of well-being is also seen in "I dream of returning to the hot springs, so famous at Kotanutunu, to the healing waters of my people, for whom I weep." For this survivor, there is again a spiritual connection and grief over what they may never see again, just like so many of their own people. Expanding on this a bit more, Hannah Chapman says that survivors fled in different directions, seeking refuge for other iwi. Some came to my people, to Whāroto, but by the time they arrived, they had contracted a disease that covered their skin with sores. It was hoped that the healing geothermal springs at Toka Enu would heal their skin and soothe them in their anguish, but despite the efforts of our Tapunu, most of them tragically died. Although the lament doesn't touch on this, we can see how this added tragedy would have been a further blow to them, and that the healing waters of Toka Enu, something which was almost holy to them, couldn't save them. But has this lament actually been recognized as literature since colonization? I believe on a massive level the answer to that is yes, it is. Ipa Tuhau is a famous Maori song which gives this tragic story to newer and newer audiences, making sure that these people and what happened to them is never forgotten. In proof of this, Himopereki Simon says that death did take place at Ranafia when the British invaded an undefended Maori settlement that was not a pa. But what also took place was the death of indigenous identity and the power of the land in forms of mana whenua and mana mothaki. This is particularly evident in the Waikato, as this land has now become the home of the dairy industry. This figurative aspect of the Waiata Tani extends to underline how we treat that environment, which is something that people in that region can never actually forget, as invasions of such brutality, whether we like it or not, can change the world around us. But the thing that will always remind us of this massacre, as Himopereki says, to this day, this sect of Nidati Epakura still resides in Tuafato, although more formally known as Nagati Turaria, that Whakapapa remains to remind us of the colonial atrocities and war crimes the British committed in the seizure of Ranafia, which sends a message in itself and makes this lament a recognized piece of literature even today. Touching on one final point, the reason that it is so important to recognize Ipa Tuhau as literature is because it is such a part of Maori culture now. To not recognize the greater meaning of this lament would be to forget where the people of Ranafia used to live and what the British troops took away from them. This is why this piece of literature is sung at events. Within the Maori philosophy, songs are to be passed down to different generations, which maintains the only real way that tragedies of colonizations can be remembered. And that is what literature is, isn't it? A piece of work which gets us to think about what has happened and reflect on where we are now. That is why Ipa Tuhau will always be recognized as literature. Not just recognized within the psalm, but also something that needs to be remembered. We see in what is now Peroa Forest Park, Tiwano asked his people to climb with him to the top of Titirapenga, an eroded volcanic plug, so that he could gaze once more upon his former home. But he died at the summit and was laid to rest in the cave. A summing up of what this lament means to me. That is, despite the death of people like Tiwana, in history and the song, its history and the song has a story that will be recounted possibly centuries from now. That is the importance of Ipa Tuhau.